The broadcast began without warning. Every screen on every inhabited planet across the Orion Arm flickered simultaneously. News feeds, entertainment channels, military displays, even personal communicators, all of them surrendered to a single, horrifying image. The alien they called the High Speaker stood before a massive viewport, its segmented body reflecting the cold light of a dying star. Behind it, chained and kneeling in rows that stretched beyond the camera's ability to capture, were humans, not soldiers. Not politicians, families, children, old people, workers, students, 10 million of them, gathered from colony worlds that had fallen silent weeks earlier. The Interstellar Coalition had assumed those colonies suffered communication failures or maybe localized rebellions. They were wrong. The Xylos Empire had been taking them one by one, herding entire populations into cargo holds, transporting them across light years to this single location, a barren moon orbiting a gas giant with rings of frozen methane. The High Speaker's voice was calm, almost gentle. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, its mandibles clicking softly between phrases. It explained that the Xylos Empire had observed humanity for 300 years. They had watched humans fight among themselves, pollute their own cradle world, and argue about everything from politics to the proper way to eat bread. The Xylos concluded that humanity was weak. Not physically weak, humans were surprisingly durable. Not intellectually weak, they had cracked faster than light travel in record time. But morally weak. Emotionally weak. The Xylos believed that a species so divided could never stand united. And so, they decided to prove it. The broadcast was not a negotiation. It was not a demand for surrender or resources or territory. It was a performance. The High Speaker announced that over the next 3 hours, every single one of the 10 million humans would be executed, live, for the entire galaxy to see. The purpose, it said, was to demonstrate that humanity was nothing more than a collection of frightened animals. That their compassion was a liability. That their love for one another was a flaw to be exploited. Then the slaughter began. The Xylos did not use weapons. They used tools. Ancient tools, ceremonial tools, designed to prolong suffering. They wanted the galaxy to watch. They wanted humans to see their own people die slowly, painfully, begging for mercy that would never come. The first hour was the worst. Children were made to watch their parents die first, then they followed. The broadcast showed everything. No cuts, no censorship. Just 10 million individual deaths, each one slightly different, each one designed to maximize the emotional damage inflicted on every human still watching. Earth saw everything. The Martian colony saw everything. The deep space mining stations, the agricultural worlds, the research outposts on the edge of known space. Every human being with access to a screen witnessed the extinction of 10 million of their own kind in real time. And for 3 hours, humanity did nothing. Not because they were weak. Because they were in shock. Because no one had ever done something like this before. Because the scale of the cruelty was so vast that the human mind could not process it. But when the broadcast ended, when the last human fell and the High Speaker turned off the camera with a polite nod, something changed. Across every human world, in every language, on every device, a single message appeared. It was not from any government or military command. It came from an old network of pre-FTL communication protocol that had been repurposed for emergencies. The message was 3 words long. Remember the 10 million. No one gave an order. No one declared war. No one called for a vote or a strategy meeting or a moment of mourning. Within 6 hours of the broadcast ending, every human warship in the galaxy changed course. Merchant vessels dumped their cargo and armed themselves with jury-rigged weapons. Passenger liners evacuated their civilians and turned into troop transports. Old mining ships, designed to crack asteroids, were refitted with targeting systems and sent toward Xylos space. The response was not organized. It was instinctive. The Xylos had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They thought human weakness came from division. They thought that because humans argued with each other, they would never agree on revenge. But they did not understand that human arguments are a luxury. When the real threat appears, when something truly unforgivable happens, all the arguing stops. Not because humans become one mind, they don't. But because every single human, no matter how different, shares one absolute truth: you do not touch our people. The first human fleet reached Xylos space 14 days after the broadcast. The Xylos were not surprised. They had expected a counterattack. What they had not expected was the speed, the coordination, and the complete lack of mercy. Human ships did not send warnings. They did not ask for surrender. They did not follow any recognized rules of engagement. They simply opened fire on everything that looked Xylos. The Xylos Empire controlled 47 star systems. They had a military that outnumbered humanity 10 to 1. They had weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand supernovas. None of it mattered. Human ships did not fight like a military. They fought like a wildfire. They targeted supply lines first, not military bases. They destroyed food production worlds, not fleet headquarters. They cut off communication relays, power grids, water purification plants, everything that kept a civilization running. The Xylos had prepared for war. They had not prepared for extermination, because that is what it was. Humanity was not trying to win. They were trying to erase. The battle for the Xylos homeworld lasted 3 days. The Xylos threw everything they had at the human fleet planet: cracker missiles, black hole generators, even a prototype weapon that could unravel molecular bonds. Human ships kept coming. They flew through debris fields. They rammed enemy vessels when their weapons ran dry. They ejected escape pods into the path of incoming fire just to use the pods as cover. It was not strategy. It was rage. Pure, cold, calculated rage. When the human fleet finally broke through the homeworld's defenses, they did not land troops. They did not take prisoners. They positioned their ships in low orbit and began firing directly at the surface. Not at military targets, at cities, at farms, at hospitals, at schools. The Xylos begged for mercy on every channel. They offered reparations. They offered to hand over the High Speaker. They offered to surrender unconditionally. Human commanders responded with 3 words: remember the 10 million. The High Speaker was found in an underground bunker 3 hours before the surface became uninhabitable. Human Marines did not capture it. They did not arrest it. They dragged it to the surface, tied it to a metal post in the middle of its own capital city, and broadcasted its execution live across the galaxy. The human Marines did not use ceremonial tools. They used their bare hands. It took 40 minutes. Every second was broadcasted. When it was over, one Marine looked into the camera and said, "Now we're even." Then he turned and walked back to his ship, but they were not even. The Xylos homeworld was gone, glassed, shattered, reduced to a molten ball of cooling rock. The human fleet had already moved on to the next system. And the next. And the next. 47 star systems. 47 worlds. Humanity did not stop until every single Xylos colony, every outpost, every mining station, and every research facility was wiped from existence. Not conquered. Not occupied. Wiped. The Xylos Empire did not surrender because humanity never gave them the chance. There was no one left to surrender. The galaxy watched in silence. Other species, the Vorn, the Kelshan, the ancient and powerful Tavar, had expected humanity to retaliate. They had expected a war, maybe even a brutal one. They had not expected complete annihilation. They had not expected a species that could turn off its own empathy like a switch and systematically destroy every trace of another intelligent civilization. The Tavar, who had existed for 50 million years, issued a quiet statement: "Do not provoke the humans," but the humans did not celebrate. When the last Xylos world fell, when the last alien life sign blinked out, the human fleet went silent. Ships drifted in the darkness, their crews staring at screens that showed nothing but empty space. The rage was gone. The adrenaline was gone. All that remained was the memory of 10 million people dying on a broadcast and the terrible knowledge of what humanity had done in return. Some humans called it justice. Some called it genocide. Most just called it survival. But every single human, from the oldest admiral to the youngest colonist, understood one thing: they would never be the same. The Xylos had wanted to prove that humans were weak. Instead, they had proven that humans were capable of something far worse than weakness. They had proven that humanity could love so fiercely and grieve so deeply that they would burn the galaxy to ashes rather than let one more of their own die alone on camera. In the months that followed, the human species did not rebuild. They reorganized. The difference was subtle, but important. Rebuilding implies returning to something old. Reorganizing means creating something entirely new. And humanity had learned something about itself during the slaughter of the 10 million and the subsequent erasure of the Xylos Empire. They had learned that their greatest strength, their ability to feel deeply, to form bonds across impossible distances, to love strangers as if they were family, was also their greatest weakness. The Xylos had exploited that weakness. No one else ever would. Earth's governments, which had spent centuries arguing over borders and resources and ideology, dissolved themselves within a single week. Not because anyone forced them to. Because the people demanded it. The old systems had failed. The old alliances had meant nothing. When the broadcast aired, when 10 million humans died on live television, no government had saved them. No military had arrived in time. No diplomatic solution had emerged. Only individual humans, acting on pure instinct, had answered the call. And so, the new human government was not a government at all. It was a network. A loose, decentralized, constantly shifting web of colonies, stations, and ships, all connected by a single agreement. Any threat to any human is a threat to every human. They called it the Vigil, not a military alliance, not a mutual defense pact. A vigil, a watchfulness, a promise to never again be caught unaware. Every human ship, no matter how small or poorly armed, was required to maintain a real-time link to the Vigil network. Every colony, no matter how remote, had to have at least one observer whose only job was to monitor for hostile activity. Every human child, upon reaching the age of 12, was taught the 3 words that had ended the war. Remember the 10 million. They were not taught to hate. They were taught to remember. There is a difference. Hate is hot and fast and burns out. Memory is cold and permanent and lasts forever. The rest of the galaxy watched humanity's transformation with a mixture of fear and fascination. The Vorn, a species of traders and negotiators, sent emissaries to Earth offering to mediate between humans and any potential future enemies. The humans thanked them politely and said no. The Kelsian, a species of philosophers and historians, asked if they could study the human response to the Xylos attack. The humans agreed, but only on the condition that the Kelsian published their findings without censorship. The Kelsian spent 3 years interviewing human survivors, soldiers, and civilians. Their final report was 3,000 pages long. The conclusion fit on a single line: humans do not forgive. They also do not forget. But most importantly, they do not stop. The ancient Tavar, who had seen empires rise and fall for 50 million years, made the most interesting observation. They noted that before the Xylos attack, humans had been divided into thousands of different groups based on nationality, religion, politics, and even favorite sports teams. After the attack, those divisions did not disappear. Humans still argued constantly, but they became irrelevant. A human from Earth and a human from a distant colony might disagree about everything under the sun, but the moment an outsider threatened either of them, the disagreement vanished. The Tavar had never seen anything like it. They had seen species unite under strong leaders. They had seen species unite under religious fervor. They had never seen a species unite under grief. And grief was exactly what drove humanity now. Not revenge that had been satisfied when the last Xylos died. Not fear. Humanity had proven they had nothing to fear from any species in the galaxy. Grief, the kind of grief that does not heal, does not fade, does not turn into acceptance. The kind of grief that becomes a part of you, like a scar that never stops hurting. And you learn to live with the pain because the alternative is forgetting. And forgetting is worse than death. The 10 million dead were not forgotten. Their names were carved into a wall on Earth, a wall that stretched for miles, each name small but legible. Each name representing a person who had laughed and cried and loved and feared and died on camera for the entertainment of a species that no longer existed. Every year, on the anniversary of the broadcast, humans across the galaxy would stop what they were doing for 1 hour. They would find a screen, any screen, and they would watch the broadcast again. Not the whole thing. No one could watch the whole thing. They would watch 1 minute, one random minute, and they would remember. The rest of the galaxy found this ritual disturbing. The Vorn tried to understand it as a form of trauma processing. The Kelsian theorized that it was a kind of religious observance. The Tavar simply observed that no other species in galactic history had ever chosen to repeatedly expose themselves to their own worst memory. It was, the Tavar said, either the most foolish or the most brilliant survival strategy ever devised. They were not sure which, but they were sure that it worked, because when, 50 years after the fall of the Xylos Empire, A new species emerged from the darkness between galaxies, a species that had never heard of humans or Xylos or anyone else. They made the same mistake. They attacked a human colony. Not a big one. A small one. A mining outpost with barely 5,000 people. The attackers, who called themselves the Gath, assumed that a species so spread out, so decentralized, so apparently disorganized, would not be able to mount a meaningful response before the Gath could consolidate their gains. They were wrong. Within 3 hours of the attack, every human ship within 100 light-years was moving toward the Gath position. Within 12 hours, ships from 200 light-years away had joined them. Within 48 hours, the Vigil network had identified the location of the Gath homeworld, mapped every Gath military asset, and calculated the exact sequence of strikes required to eliminate them. The humans did not wait for permission. They did not ask for reinforcements. They simply went. The Gath were technologically superior to the Xylos. They were larger, stronger, and more numerous. They had weapons that could erase matter from existence and shields that could reflect energy attacks back at their source. None of it mattered. The humans did not fight the Gath military. They fought the Gath supply lines, their communication networks, their food production, their water, their air. They fought the Gath's ability to exist as a coherent civilization. Within 6 months, the Gath had lost 30% of their population not to combat, but to starvation, disease, and environmental collapse caused by human attacks on their infrastructure. The Gath surrendered. They offered reparations. They offered to withdraw from human space permanently. They offered to hand over the individuals who had ordered the attack on the mining colony. The human response was the same 3 words: remember the 10 million. The Gath did not understand what those words meant. They had not been there for the original broadcast. They did not know about the Xylos. They only knew that the humans kept repeating the same phrase over and over, and that every time they said it, they seemed to become more determined, not less. The Tavar, watching from a safe distance, finally understood. They sent a message to the Gath, explaining the history. They told the Gath about the 10 million humans slaughtered on live broadcast. They told them about the erasure of the Xylos Empire. They told them about the Wall of Names and the annual ritual of remembering. And then they told the Gath something that no one had realized until that moment. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to prove that the attack on the mining colony was a mistake. Not a tactical mistake. A moral mistake. The humans were demonstrating, in the only language the galaxy seemed to understand, that the cost of harming even one human was the complete and total destruction of the attacker's entire civilization. The Gath, after a long and painful debate, chose to surrender unconditionally. They agreed to disarm, to open their worlds to human observers, and to pay reparations for the next 500 years. The humans accepted the surrender, but they did not trust it. They never trusted anything again. They placed Vigil observers on every Gath world, in every Gath city, outside every Gath school. They did not call it an occupation. They called it a reminder. A reminder of what happens when you forget that humans are watching, and the galaxy learned. The Vorn stopped trying to negotiate on humanity's behalf. The Kelsian stopped asking philosophical questions about human nature. The Tavar, who had seen everything, quietly updated their records. Humans, do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not forget that they will never forget. As for the humans themselves, they continued to live. They built new colonies. They had children. They argued about politics and sports and the proper way to eat bread. They laughed and cried and loved and feared, just like they always had. But every year, on the anniversary of the broadcast, they stopped. They found a screen. They watched 1 minute of 10 million people dying. And then they went back to living, carrying the grief with them like a stone in their pocket, heavy, cold, and always there. The Wall of Names grew longer, not because new humans died, but because the wall had to be expanded to include the names of everyone born since the broadcast. The humans added them deliberately, intentionally, as a statement. The dead were not separate from the living. The 10 million were not a tragedy that happened to other people. They were family, and family is remembered.